Hello everyone, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon for latest update. So friends, today I am going to explain Accenture Java interview questions and answers. So actually this video is especially for first round of the interview. So actually the candidate got selected for first round, and tomorrow I will post the second round of interview questions and answers. So actually they're asking very easy questions and interesting questions. Now I am going to explain each and every question with answer. So the first question what they're asking is, what is constructor? Constructor contains block of code. It is just like a method. Constructor just look like a method, but it does not have a return type. But in case of method, it is having the return type. Constructor is called when instance of the class is created and also the memory allocated for the object. So actually when the constructor is called is nothing but whenever we are creating the object, so that time the constructor will be called and also the memory is allocated for the object at the time of constructor is calling. So the constructor is called whenever we create a object using new keyword. So when the constructor is called, so whenever we are creating the object using new keyword, that time the constructor will be called. If the class does not have any constructor, the Java compiler creates a default constructor. Sometimes we are not creating constructor, so that time the Java compiler creates a default constructor. So rules to create a constructor. The name of the constructor is same as class name. So the constructor name is it should be class name. Constructor does not have any return type. So constructor does not have any return type. Types of constructors in Java, we have two types of constructors. One is default constructor or no argument constructor, another one is parameterized constructor. So second question is, what is final, finally and finalize in Java? So first, final. Final is a keyword can be used with class, methods and variables. So final is nothing but it's a one of the keyword. It can be applied for class level, method level and variable level. A final class cannot be inherited. Suppose if you make any class as a final, it cannot be inherited. A final method cannot be overridden. So if you make any method as a final, so we cannot override that method. And a final variable cannot be reassigned. Suppose if you declare any variable as a final variable, we cannot reassign. So at the time of declaration, what we are initializing is a final. So we cannot reassign any variable to the final variables. Coming to the finally. Finally keyword is used to create a block of code that follows a try catch block. Generally finally it's a block. It is always executing like try and catch block, and final block always execute whether exception is raised or not raised. So generally the finally block is executed either the exception is right or not raised. So all the cases finally block is executing. Next, finalize method. The finalize method is used just before object is destroyed and it can be called just prior to the object creation. So the finalize method, whenever the object is going to destroy, so that time the finalize method will be called. So third question is, what is static in Java? First, what is static? Static is a keyword which is mainly used for memory management. We can apply static keyword for variables, methods, blocks and classes. So static is nothing but it's one of the keyword. It can be applied for like variables levels, method levels, block levels and class level. Suppose if you declare any variable is a static, so that nothing but a static variables. When we create a static variable, then single copy of variable is created which is shared by the all the object. So generally the normal variables are the like we cannot share the object to for multiple variables, but in case of static variables only one single copy of variable is created and which is shared by all object. All object can share the same single variable. So because of that the memory is like we can reduce the memory. Static variables occupied memory only once in the class area at the time of class loading. So generally the static variable occupied memory only once in the class area at the time of class loading. So because of the class like static variables, we can save the memory. Because for example, if I am creating the like suppose I am considering one class like a company. In the company, like employees are I am declaring the employees. So 10,000 employees I am declaring, but employee ID, employee name is different from one employee to another employee. But in case of like company name is same for all the employees. So that time, so if you declare company name as a static variable, so only once the memory is allocated for each and every object, the same like variable is shared by the all the objects. Static method. The method which is declared as a static, then it is known as a static method. For calling static method, we no need to create an object, just like we can call the static method using a class name. So generally how we can call the methods, like using the object dot method name. But if you declare any method as static, it is nothing but a static method. So for calling the static method, no need to create the object, just we can use the class name dot method name, so then we can call it. So next is the static block. The static block contains a set of statements which are executed by the Java before main method execution. So generally, suppose if you want to execute something before main method execute, then we can use the static block. Generally in Java, only the main method is first it is executing. But in case of static block, if you want to execute something before main method, then we can use the static block. What is static class? If you declare any class is static, it is nothing but a static class. We can declare inner class as static, we cannot declare outer class as a static. So next, fourth question is, what is different between list and set? So the main difference between the list and set is list allows duplicates while set does not allow duplicates. So generally the list allows duplicate, but in case of set, if you are trying to insert the duplicate, it will just override the previous one. All the elements of a set should be unique. If you try to insert the duplicate elements in the set, it would be replaced with the existing value. List is an order collection, it maintains the insertion order. So in list, whatever order we are inserting, the same order will be stored, and while retrieving also the same order it will be retrieving. uh, like set is an unordered collection, it does not maintain any order. But in case of set, it does not maintain any order, insertion order. There are few implementation of set which maintain the order, such as linked as set, it maintain the elements in insertion order. Generally if you like insert the element into set, so it's not be stored in a insertion order, it not follow the insertion order, it store the randomly, it will be stored, because set internally like follow the hash code mechanism. So for each and every object we are inserting, the object will contain the different hash code. Because of that, it will be stored in a different location. So what is collection? Fifth question is, what is collection? Collection is an object that represents a group of objects. So collection is a one object that represents a group of objects, such as classes and interface. That means the collection contains a different class and interfaces. So what is collection framework? The collection in Java is a framework that provides an architecture to store and manipulate the group of objects. So collection framework is is one of the framework that provides a architecture to store and manipulate the group of objects. To Java collection can achieve all the operation that you perform on a data, such as searching, sorting, inserting, and manipulation and deletion. So generally the collection can provide the different operation, like if you want to search the data, or sorting, or inserting, or manipulating, or deleting, we can use the collection. So next question is, what is volatile keyword? Volatile keyword is used to modify the values of the variables by different threads. It means that multiple threads can use the method and instance of the class at the same time without any problem. The volatile keyword can be used either with the primitive type or object type. We can use the volatile keyword either primitive and object types. What is concurrency modification exception in Java? So sometimes we are getting the concurrency modification exception in Java. So that's why they're asking this concurrency modification exception. The concurrency modification exception occurs when we iterating any collection object at the same time. If you perform any action against that operation, like modification on a collection object, then it throws the concurrency modification exception. This means, suppose I am like iterating the data from the collection object, in between That means whenever we are iterating in between, if you perform any operation, like if you're trying to deleting any element from the collection, so that time it will throw the exception called concurrency modification exception. So what is different between throw and throws? There is throw is used to explicitly throw an exception. Throws is used to declare an exception. Basically, the throw keyword is used to explain throw the exception. But in case of throws, just declare the exception. Checked exception cannot be propagated with the throw only. Checked exception can be propagated with the throws. Checked exception cannot be propagated with throws, but in case of throws we can propagate it. Throws is followed by instance, throw is followed by instance, throws is followed by class. Throw is used within the method, but in case of throws is used method signature. You cannot throw multiple exception, but you can declare the multiple exception like throws, IO exception, SQL exception. Like this we can throw. What is serialization? Serialization in Java is a mechanism of writing the state of an object into the byte stream is nothing but a serialization. It is mainly used in Hibernate, RMI, JPA, EJP and JMS technologies. The reverse operation of serialization is called deserialization. So what is serialization? Serialization, suppose if you want to transfer the data from one layer to another layer, so we can make that D2 as a serialization, because if you make that object as serialization, the data is passing from one layer to another layer is very easy. That's why we can make the object as a serialization. So what is cloning in Java? The object cloning is a way to create a exact copy of object. The clone method of object class is used to clone the object. So actually, suppose if you want to clone any object, we can use the clone method to clone the object. The java.lang.clone interface must be implemented by the class whose object clone we want to create. Suppose if you want to make any object as a clone, so that time so the class should be implement the clonable interface. Otherwise, we can get the clone not support exception. Like if you see how we can create the cloning object, like suppose I am creating one customer class, customer one equal to new customer. Here I am passing the two values, customer ID and customer name. So here I am going to create a one more object, but I want to clone this existing object. That's why customer one dot clone. This means it will clone the same object to the customer two also. So what is transient keyword? Transient in Java is used to mark the member variable not to be serialized when it is persistent to stream of bytes. So generally, suppose if you make any variable as a transient, it is not participating in the serialization. So whenever we are serializing, the data is passing from one layer to another layer. But in case of if we make any variable as a transient, it is not participating in the serialization. Why we make the variable as a transient means actually suppose if you are not to transient make any variable as a transient, so it will be visible to the all the members. So suppose if you make any variable as a transient, instead of actual value it will go to the address to the layer. So the because of security reason we can use the transient keyword. So explain the life cycle, Servlet life cycle. The life cycle is the process from the construction to till the extraction of the object. So in Servlets, the life cycle is whenever we are creating the object to when we are destroying the object, that is nothing but a Servlet life cycle. The Servlet life cycle follows certain life cycle methods. One is the like different steps we have, like one is the loading the Servlet class, next instance of the Servlet and call the init method and then call the service method and destroy method. Now I am going to explain each and every method. So load the Servlet class. The class loader is responsible to load the Servlet class into the container. Actually in Java we have different class loaders are there. So the class loader is responsible to load the Servlet class into the container. The Servlet class is loaded when the first request comes from the web container. So whenever we make a first request, so the Servlet container will create the object for the Servlet class. Create the instance of the Servlet. After loading the Servlet class into the container, the web container create instance. The instance of the Servlet class is created only once in the Servlet lifecycle. Actually, we can create only one time the instance of the Servlet. calling the init method. The init method performs some specific action construction of the class. It is automatically called by the Servlet container. It is called by only once throughout the Servlet lifecycle. So basically, this init method will be called only one time in the Servlet lifecycle. But in case of service method, it will call for each and every request. So if you see the signature of the init method, public void init servlet config object throws servlet exception. Coming to the service method perform actual task of a servlet container. The web container is responsible to call the service method each time the request is for servlet is received. The service invoke the do get, do post, and do put to do delete method based on the HTTP request. So actually, the service method each and every request the service method will be called. But in case of init method, only throughout lifecycle, only it is one time it will be called. So for each and every request, service method will be called. Though service method internally calls the different method do get, do post, do put, do delete methods. So if you see the syntax public void service servlet request and response object we are passing, and it will be throw servlet exception and IO exception. Call the destroy method. Destroy method is executed when the servlet container remove the servlet from the container. It is called only once at the end of the servlet lifecycle. So actually destroy method also will be called only one time in the servlet lifecycle. So when it will be called means whenever the servlet is going to end, that time the destroy method will be called. If you see the syntax public void destroy method. So next question is what is different between get and post. The get limited amount of data can be sent because data is sent in the header part. So because if you use the get method, the data will be passed in the header part of the like URL bar. But in case of post, large amount of data can be sent because data is sent in the body. So in case of post, if you use the post method, the data will be passed through like inside of the method. But in case of get, it will be passing through the URL bar. So if you use the post, so no one can see the what data we are passing. But in case of get, we can see what data we can pass it. In get not secured because data is exposed in the URL bar. So that's why it is saying that if you use the get method, it is a not secured. The data is exposed in the URL bar. But in case of post, it is a secured because it is not exposed in the URL bar. So but in case of post, it is not exposed to the data in the URL bar. Suppose if you are using like login username and password, suppose you are using get method, so everyone can see in the URL bar like username and password. But in case of if you use the post method, no one can see the username and password because it will pass the data in the bot through body. Get can be bookmarked, post cannot be bookmarked. So if you use the get, we can bookmark. Suppose if you use the Google, we can bookmark the data. But in case of post, we cannot bookmark the data. Get is idempotent, post is not idempotent. Get is more efficient and used than post. So get always we can use more than the post is less efficient to use. So next question is Spring Boot benefit compared to Spring. So if you see compared to the Spring Boot many advantages. So but in case of Spring Spring Boot creates standalone Spring application with a minimum configuration needed. It enables Tomcat Jetty which make it just code and run the application. So actually in the Spring we cannot create the standalone application, but in case of Spring Boot we can create the standalone application with a minimum configuration. But in Spring Boot does not have any like Tomcat Jetty inbuilt server, but in case of Spring Boot we have inbuilt Tomcat and Jetty server, so no need to use the external server. So Spring by default it contains the servers. Provides a production ready feature such as a metrics, health checkups, and external configuration. So, but in case of Spring Boot, like we have a like different types of features are there, like metrics, health checkups, and external configuration. So, next point is absolutely no requirement of external configuration. For example, if you use the Spring for each and everything, we should be doing in a XML configuration, and like sometimes we can use the annotation based configuration also, but it's only partially configuration. But in Spring Boot, no need to write the XML configuration because Spring Boot provides like different types of annotation. So using this annotation, we can run the application, but no need to create the extra XML configuration. So friends, this is the all about Accenture first round of Java entry question. Please don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thanks for watching this video.